Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Thrive Market. Thrive Market is on a mission to make healthy living easy and affordable for every American family. They're a membership-based online shopping club offering thousands of the best-selling organic foods and natural products in everyday sizes. And they sell for up to 50% off retail prices with free and fast nationwide home delivery. This is really cool. For every paid membership, Thrive Market donates a free membership to a low-income family, teacher, or military. For a limited time, Paleo Hacks is doing an exclusive offer with Thrive Market. So you can go over to thrivemarket.com/paleohacks and register to win a $1,000 shopping spree. That's $1,000 of free stuff you can win. That's a grand prize. We're also giving away 10 second prize winners that get 1 year free membership. And because we love all of you equally, as a bonus, every new member who registers through thrivemarket.com/paleohacks is going to receive 25% off their first purchase. All right, time for today's show. Paleo Hackers, welcome back to another edition of the Paleo Hacks podcast. I'm your host, Clark. Of course, this is brought to you by paleohacks.com. Head on over there, check out the forum, community, the mouth-watering recipes we got. If you haven't cooked or don't like to cook, that's okay. We do it for you. We give you the whole layout on what you need to do over there. Got hundreds of them. But that's not what today's show is about. With me on the other end is Chris Kelly. He is a pro mountain biker, functional diagnostics practitioner, graduated the Ketogenic Institute, and currently runs Nourish, Balance, Thrive. Chris, my man, welcome to the show.
It's a privilege. Thank you very much for having me on, Clark.
So we started this because you reached out to me and about Nourish, Balance, Thrive, correct?
That's correct.
And in that, you this is a special call for me because you said that you actually listened to the Paleo Hacks podcast, and that kind of started some change.
Yeah, exactly. It was quite big change. It was 2 life-changing experiences, I would say.
Wow. And so you were listening to our Kalish podcast episode, right? And is that kind of how you got into it, or how did you get into what you're currently doing right now?
Well, yeah, that was it. I mean, it didn't quite start with the Kalish podcast. So you've got a link to that in the show notes. People have to go back and listen to that podcast. It's Dan Kalish is a fantastic speaker, and he does an amazing job of describing some really technical things without using any technical words. And it's a real gift that he has. And so I heard that podcast, and I was already, some way along the path of feeling better. So, I've never spent much time in my life feeling very good. I've always felt kind of awful, and I didn't really realize it until more recently. I had a lot of bloating, a lot of GI issues, brain fog, a lot of fatigue. I'm a pro mountain biker, and I could win bike races, but I was always just so tired outside of training, and I couldn't sleep either. It was horrendous. And, I listened to a lot of podcasts. I listened to the Paleo Hacks podcast, discovered the paleo diet, had some really great results, saw an improvement in a lot of my symptoms by changing my food, stopped eating, pasta and, oh my God, so many things I stopped eating. Bread, used to make my own bread. I can't believe I used to do that now. But yeah, so that saw me feeling maybe 50, 75% better. But it was clear that I still wasn't feeling as good as I could. And, I heard Dan talk on your podcast, and I thought, well, he's in Oakland. Maybe I should work with this guy. And that was the worst reason to think that you should work with someone. Just because he's local doesn't mean anything at all. And of course,
he knows his stuff. He knows his stuff. A fellow Oakland.
Yeah. But I never saw him in person. I talked to Dan on Skype, and he ordered some tests for me, and the results came back, and I had multiple GI infections and very low cortisol, or adrenal fatigue as some people call it, and then a whole bunch of nutritional problems that we found on the urine testing. And it was only once I corrected those that I started to feel really, really good. And I was so inspired by the whole experience, I decided that I wanted to do his training course, right? So I'm an engineer, I'm a computer scientist, and I want to know how things work. And I thought, I've got to figure this out. Like, who is this guy? He's a chiropractor. How can he do this? Is it like a magic trick? And so I did his training course, and I ended up getting together with a buddy that I ride bikes with who happened to be a medical doctor. And we ended up launching Nourish, Balance, Thrive. And Dan's protocols form the core of what we do. You know, it's not quite the same as what Dan does now, but yeah, that's the core, man. That's the ticket that gets people feeling better every time.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So you felt better and then you wanted to share it. That seems to be a common thread we see with people who are really passionate behind what they do. And so Nourish, Balance, Thrive, what's kind of the mission of what you two are doing over there?
Yeah, so it's not just me now. Like it kind of, I've been growing, you know, people are passionate about this stuff and they're willing to help me for not very much money. So my wife is a food scientist. Yeah, that's always a good sign, isn't it? When someone wants to help you without being paid. My wife's a food scientist and, you know, obviously she's heavily into the paleo diet. So she coaches people on paleo and then with the autoimmune protocol, which I'm sure some people have heard of, and sometimes ketogenic diets. And then so Jamie, she's a medical doctor. She's also another pro mountain biker. And then I work with a registered nurse who has also done the Kalish practitioner training course. And more recently, I've added a medical director in Tommy Wood. Tommy Wood is another medical doctor from the UK. He's also a PhD fellow currently studying neonatal brain metabolism. And he has been extraordinarily generous with his time to me. And he's been teaching me over the last year or so. And, you know, we've been looking at test results together and he does one-on-one consults through my practice too. So it's quite a cool team that I've kind of assembled now. It's very exciting.
It's like the Ninja Turtles getting together.
Yeah.
Cool, man. And so where did the pro mountain biking tie in? I'm curious behind the backstory of the training, of kind of what it looks like to be a pro mountain biker. How did exercise tie into all that? It's kind of a loaded question. Tell me your pro mountain bike story, but set it up. How'd you get into that?
Well, yeah, it was kind of strange and stupid, but that was one of my main motivations. The first book on the paleo diet I read was called The Paleo Diet for Athletes by Joe Friel and Lauren Cordain. And I don't think I was that cognizant of how bad I was feeding at that time, you know, or how bad some of my symptoms were. And really all I wanted to do was improve my sports performance, you know. And, you know, I haven't always been a pro, right? I started off as, you know, riding sport, or Cat 2 as it's called in mountain biking. And then I managed to upgrade to Cat 1. And really I was just looking for a way in which I could improve my performance so I could upgrade and get my pro license. And it became clear that I just wasn't going to achieve that through any more training, right? So I'm, you know, riding my bike 25, 30 hours a week. I'm just not getting faster anymore, right? You just get, you know, you just max something out. That's all you can get from that.
Yeah.
And, you know, nowadays I do far, far less training than that, and still get great results. And I'm sure it's just because, you know, I concentrate on staying healthy. Like I keep running the tests. I keep fixing the problems that I find. I stay really, you know, tight with the paleo diet. I look after my sleep. I manage my stress. And those are the things which I think get great results, you know, and there's only kind of a limit to what you can get with just training alone.
Absolutely. So you look at the other components behind what you do and kind of boost it from that.
Yeah, exactly.
And before the call, we were talking about training because people hear pro mountain bike or they hear pro athlete and they think train. They might also hear endurance testing for endurance athletes, and they keep thinking training, extend the amounts, go harder, work longer. But you said that's not what you do. And you were just touching on how there's only so much training you can do. Can you expand on that a little more?
Sure. So, you know, I used to do long, slow distance. Like I used to spend hours and hours kind of noodling around with my heart rate, you know, pretty low. And I think that approach can work. But, you know, now I have a 2-year-old daughter and I'm running my own business and I really don't have time. I can't allow that much time, 25, 30 hours a week to get results in that way. And I found that, you know, so recently I'm at the moment, I'm racing a sport called cyclocross, which is a bit like mountain biking, only the bikes are a little bit different and the course is a little bit shorter. And that's here in Northern California where I live. And, you know, the races are pretty short. They're only 60 minutes. And so, you know, during the week, I've done some weeks here, you know, where I've only done 5 or 6 hours of training and been getting exactly the same results, you know, but those 5 or 6 hours, rather than, you know, just noodling around with my heart rate at 130, I'll go out and I'll do sets of 90 seconds at VO2 max. So it's almost like I've taken that big volume of training and I've compacted it down to its essence, and I'm still getting the same results.
Yeah. So you're working, hate to say the cliche, but smarter, not harder.
I guess it is.
Smarter.
I mean, it depends on your goal, right? So, with the mountain biking, I do it because I love it, right? I absolutely love it. And, I live in the Redwood Trees here near Santa Cruz, and the trails are unbelievable. And, I could easily go out and do that all day long, right? Just ride my bike for 4 hours every day because it's so much fun. But obviously life gets in the way and you just can't do that every day. It's not possible for most people.
We have quite a few endurance athletes who listen to the show, and they listen to Ben Greenfield, who's been on the show. They listen to shows like this. I forget what other endurance athletes we had on here. But, the common cookie cutter endurance athlete, I'm not one, but I'm assuming from what I see online, is like a vegan, and they run super long marathons. You seem to do the exact opposite and get similar results. You eat ketogenic and you train very high intensity interval training, VO2 max testing. Is that kind of the two sides right there? There's kind of like the two trains of thoughts.
Yeah. So, you touched on the ketogenic diet there, and I should probably say a little bit about that because that's been so helpful to me. Back when I wasn't feeling very good and had a lot of fatigue symptoms, I was eating a very high carbohydrate diet and consuming a great deal of what I know now is just really sugar, those maltodextrin gels that come in the little packets.
Yeah.
That, so many people, I still see it out on the trails today, people choking those things down and bars and whatever else, all this kind of junk food. And that got me into a world of pain, with what looked like pre-diabetes, fasting blood glucose at 120 milligrams per deciliter, and severe hypoglycemic episodes during exercise. Just really not a fun place to be. And it's taken me a long time. Like, it took sort of over 2 years to make the transition, but I now eat a very high fat ketogenic diet, and I'm able to ride my bike basically indefinitely, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, no problem, without eating anything at all, just drinking plain water. And then I find that the recovery is just so much quicker. You just don't seem to get so much inflammation and kind of, I don't know, just the horrible feeling that, just want to spend the rest of the day on the couch after you training. And that's, again, is like so important to me. It's, I want to spend some time with my daughter after I ride my bike, or maybe I want to do some work or something. And I just never could do that before, like I would just feel so tired. I just would want to sit on the couch. So yeah, definitely look into that. Dominic D'Agostino was interviewed by Tim Ferriss recently on his podcast as a 3-hour epic. And so if you're interested in that, that's kind of a good place to start.
Okay. And can you describe a little more of the ketogenic diet? This is someone's first time hearing about it, and they want to get up off the couch without that or they want to cut down their training time or experiment with ketosis. What's the basics of it?
Well, the basic is really just carbohydrate restriction. It's like the first thing I think of when I think about the ketogenic diet. So, you just decrease your carbs probably to less than 50 grams a day. And I'm talking about net carbs, so you don't count vegetables. This is not a meat-only diet. When I look at my plate, it still consists mostly of plants, right? It's many different types of plant I can get my hands on. And then the bulk of my energy is coming from the fat that's in that meal, right? So either the fat that's on the meat that I'm eating, or maybe we add some fat in the form of maybe olive oil or coconut oil or ghee or tallow or something like that. So the bulk of my energy is coming from the fat. So that would be about 70%-ish of my calories come from fat. And then so moderate protein, probably the protein is probably not going to change from whatever you're eating right now. And then you just severely restrict the carbohydrates. And then you get into this magical place called ketosis, where you're primarily burning fat and these other little carbon-based molecules called ketones.
Yeah.
And that's your energy. You don't need the carbohydrate anymore. And so when I'm doing these high-intensity intervals, and especially when I'm doing the longer rides, I'm just not using carbohydrate. I'm using fat and ketones. And so I don't have this absolute requirement to go home and eat a bunch of carbs to replace that glycogen that I might have used during my ride.
Yeah. So are you still you're obviously still using glycogen then, but your stores just don't get depleted. They're spared, and you go directly for the ketones for energy. Or what's the theory behind that, and how your muscles are working?
I think we're still trying to figure that out, actually. I think we're still trying to figure that out. So we know that once the exercise intensity goes above a certain level, it becomes impossible to burn fat anymore, just because there's so much oxygen is required, and you just can't bring the oxygen in quickly enough. And so you will use some carbohydrate, but you have to remember that, you still have, even when you go on a high fat ketogenic diet, you still have a lot of glycogen stored, and especially in the liver. And so you can use that glycogen to kind of tide over those periods of high intensity. So say for me on a mountain bike, I get into a rock garden or something, and I want to power up to 500 watts and get over this big obstacle, then I'm probably going to be using sugar at that point, right? We call that glycolytic.
Okay.
But I have some glycogen still. And in fact, you might want to link to this. Jeff Volek has just published his faster study of elite ultra runners who are keto adapted. And in that study, they really didn't see much difference in the levels of stored glycogen in between the two groups. So there was two groups of runners. One were eating a very high fat ketogenic diet. The other were eating a normal or a more normal high carbohydrate diet. And when they looked at the glycogen levels with muscle biopsy, they didn't really see much difference between the two groups. So like I say, this is kind of cutting edge stuff, and people are still trying to figure out the details.
Yeah, I mean, again, that raw vegan ultra endurance runner archetype is still very prevalent, and that's just what I've linked up through common thread until, I don't know, the past year or so, was that endurance runners are all eating massive amounts of carbohydrates because that's the fuel they're tapping into. But then there's the research coming out recently that seems cutting edge, saying almost the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't know. Have you ever talked to, I have my own podcast, and I'd love to interview Rich Roll and find out exactly how he's doing it, because I've worked with a number of athletes that were previously eating a vegetarian or vegan diet. And I was actually one of them too as well. When I wasn't feeling good, vegetarianism was one of the things that I tried. And it just made me worse. It was a horrible, horrible idea. And
he's the ultra endurance runner who eats primarily vegan, right?
I think he is vegan, yeah.
100%,
exactly.
yeah.
But he still looks fantastic. And he's still, he's getting great results. And, obviously he's doing something special. Yeah. And, I'd love to know what that special thing is.
Yeah, that's a good guest. I have him on the guest list, but we probably haven't reached out. One thing I wanted to touch on with you, Chris, is not hormones, rather, but testing. I know you're really big at Nourish, Balance, Thrive on testing. Can you kind of walk us through the very basics of what testing is, why someone should do it, and more specifics on what you do?
Sure. So I am a huge fan of the testing. I'm a technical guy. I like to try and figure out how things work. And you can do that now. And you don't need the permission of a doctor to do it. If you go and see your primary care physician, for example, and say, I want to qualify for the Boston Marathon, will you run a comprehensive blood chemistry on me so I can see if I've got any problems that maybe could help me be a better runner? He's just going to look at you like you've just landed on, from Mars and say no. And, that's not the way that our healthcare systems are set up at the moment. Everything needs a disease code, and there needs to be an abnormal finding, right? So if you walk into your doctor's office and present with symptoms, then maybe he'll run some, or she will run some blood chemistry. But if your goal is purely athletic performance, then, that's different. And you're probably going to have to pay for that yourself. But it's not expensive. If you look around on websites like Life Extension, for example, you can see that the blood chemistries are really inexpensive now.
What are we talking?
So you can get what they call a CBC, or a complete blood cell count, and a comprehensive wellness profile for, I believe, $35 on Life Extension.
Whoa.
And yeah. And so the way it works is you place an order, and then they send you a PDF requisition form, and you take that directly to the lab. So you don't go and see your doctor, you just go straight to the lab, and then they draw the bloods, and then the results come back to you electronically. Now, that's the easy part. The difficult thing is trying to figure out what the results mean. And so that's where someone like me or Tommy, who is the medical doctor I work with, can help you. Like, so we look at test results and we're thinking, how can we help this guy run faster? How can we help this lady bike faster? How can we help this guy swim faster, right? So we're looking at the same set of test results, but with a totally different objective.
Wow, that's fascinating. So the $35 test, you have kind of a complete comprehensive blood panel? Or
yeah,
what does the test cover?
It's not the world's best blood chemistry for $35. They're kind of funny. I guess because they run so many of those $35 panels, they can afford to offer them very cheaply. And then as soon as you start adding extra markers on, like say fasting insulin and vitamin D and homocysteine and hemoglobin A1C, some of these other markers which are quite interesting to look at, the panel becomes very much more expensive.
Yeah.
So you kind of that's the best bang for your buck is the $35 chemistry. And we frequently see, and I've seen this in myself too, so nutritional deficiencies, which mean you can't make red blood cells as well as you possibly could. And this leads to decreased oxygen deliverability, or as a doctor would call it, like a mild anemia. They would call it a subclinical anemia. And it's super common in endurance athletes. And if you can fix those nutritional deficiencies, either with your diet or with some supplements, that's going to make a huge difference to your athletic performance, probably more than any amount of training would do.
Okay. And so you can tell how to do that or what they need based on the test results?
Yeah, exactly. So it's difficult. I can't just name one marker on the blood chemistry and say, oh, well, if this marker is greater than this value, then you need this particular supplement. It's a bit more complicated than that. And you have to look at the test result in its totality to really see the picture that's emerging. And then, of course, you have to consider your own symptoms and your position and your diet and other things as well. So it's a somewhat complicated process to do the interpretation and decide what to do next, but it's not that hard, we always get great results in this way.
What are you seeing on every test that's coming back to you? Are there any trends with either the endurance athletes you're working with? Are there things you're seeing a lot of?
Yeah, for sure. So the two things that spring to mind immediately, one I already mentioned, the subclinical anemia. So people whose, you can look at your last blood chemistry and look and see what the hemoglobin was in milligrams per deciliter. And if it's less than 14, then if you're a guy, then I think that something to think about, right? There might be some room for improvement there. And then you would look at the other markers. So that's super common. And quite often the cause is, like I say, a deficiency of either B12 or folate or maybe zinc or copper. And the other thing that we just seem to be seeing all the time at the moment is iron overload. So this gets super confusing. When I say anemia, people start thinking about iron deficiency, and iron deficiency can cause anemia. But there's also iron overload. So this is where probably through a genetic mutation. So there's something special about your genetics that you're better at absorbing iron than other people. And so you end up with too much of this nutrient. And when you have too much of it, it causes a lot of problems. The iron, it gets deposited in your vital organs and into your joints, and it can end up in all of the tissues. And it literally makes you rust. So it causes a lot of inflammation and oxidative stress, and all kinds of problems that will show up all over the blood chemistry. And the solution is actually pretty simple. It's just to go give blood. It's like, that's how you fix it. And that could be a life-changing experience. So that's kind of two things that we see all the time.
Wow. Okay. And so how do you know with the first one, if it's a B12, copper, zinc deficiency, based on the test, can you isolate it to one of those? Or do you have to take a kind of comprehensive supplement that has those together?
Yeah, so the way to pin it down is to use the urine test that Dan talked about in that first interview. And he didn't. So that's the genius of Dan. It's like I say, he talks about technical things without ever really going into details that anybody would not care about. And I do not have that skill. So the test.
We have a smart audience, so you can dive into it.
That's good. Yeah, I think there's some of that too. Like some people do appreciate the technical details and they like the names of things. But yeah, on the urinary organic acids test, so that's the test that Dan was talking about. Is the one I use is made by Genova Diagnostics, and it's called the Organics Comprehensive Profile. Mm-hmm. There are two organic acids on that test. They're called methylmalonic acids and forminoglutamate. And those two organic acids, they start to build up in the urine sample when there's insufficient B12 or folate. So you can do that test and know whether you need more of these nutrients. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the blood chemistry and I'm taking the urinary organic acids and I'm comparing them to form a complete picture that will help me decide which nutrients or which supplements are likely to be most helpful for the athlete.
Okay. And is there any supplements that you just generally recommend, kind of everyone should be taking, or certain people might consider taking supplement X based on endurance training? Is there any kind of must-haves?
Yeah, I think so. So I've looked at this in detail. So Tommy is amazing. He's so great. He's a research scientist, and so research and searching PubMed is what he does for a living all day long. And so I can ask him a question, and he'll send me 7 papers within 2 minutes. And I probably spend, oh my God, I don't know, between 40 and 60 hours a week just reading all these papers. And nutritional deficiencies amongst athletes are just incredibly common. So zinc, magnesium, a lot of the things that even iron actually is extremely common as well. But you really can't guess it. You got to do the test. And I think everybody should take a multivitamin. I kind of fall into that camp. But you've got to be careful about which one you take. Like if you can't afford it, like you should probably just skip it. Like don't take one of the cheap ones from Costco,
yeah.
Right, yeah. So the way you know it's a good one is if it comes in multiple capsules, right? It's probably not possible to fit everything you need in one day, especially if it's got a decent amount of magnesium in it, into a single capsule. So I like the Thorne Research, the EXOS multivitamin, and that comes in 6 capsules a day. And I believe Designs for Health has a similar product. And there's a bunch of them out there that are pretty good. And you can look and you'll see that they have things like 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate rather than folic acid, and I don't know. Quite often the price is tells you something about the quality of it as well. Like if it only costs $10, it's probably not a good one.
Yeah. So with the supplements, then it can be kind of a charged topic for some people because they either fall into one of two extremes. They think that everybody needs to take supplements. That's it. End of discussion. You can't get all your nutrients from food alone. They've done X, Y, and Z studies on it. And then there's the other extreme of no one should take supplements. We can get everything you need from your diet, and if you're not, that just means you're not eating correctly. What's kind of that middle path of like smart supplementation? I'm sure it exists. What does it look like?
Yeah, well, I think it's highly individual, right? So you do the test and you look at what's going to work best for you, and it's not just your environment; it's also your genetics, right? So, for example, I have some genetic mutations with the MTHFR gene, and that means I don't process nutrients like folate from my diet very well, and I do very well on taking those things as a supplement. So it's you as an individual, and then there's some things which you just can't get in the amount that you as an athlete would need to improve your sports performance. So a really good example is creatine, and I sell creatine, so maybe you should take this information with a pinch of salt. But go do your homework. Go and have a look and see what research you can find on creatine, and see what results that research showed, and then look to see whether it's possible to get that much creatine from your diet alone. And I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to find, and I know you're going to get great results. And I've seen that. I've measured it in myself that my sprint power has improved dramatically since I started taking creatine. And interestingly, this ties back into the whole methylation thing. So making creatine, so your body has the ability to make creatine inside. And it's a very methyl donor expensive process. So that means you need more of the folate, more of the methyl donors. And so if you're not very good at processing those from your diet in the first place, you might be kind of crappy at making creatine too. So that's another kind of reason why you'd want to take it as a supplement.
It's because one of your energy systems utilizes creatine for it, correct? So the phosphate
Yeah, that's right. The phosphocreatine power system. Yeah. So that first 20 seconds when
it's the fast twitch.
It's exactly, which I have very little of. But yeah, for me, it's the start of a cyclocross race, right? The gun goes off.
Yeah.
I've got 20 seconds to get to that whole shot, else I'm going to be at the very back of the field, never to be seen again. And so that phosphocreatine system becomes really important, and taking the supplement has been tremendously helpful to me.
And so the theory goes, if you have more creatine intake, it'll circulate better, and you can tap into that for that explosive power on your fast twitch is better?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. And have you seen any sort of like dosing or grams per day that's the most effective, or kind of what's the minimal effective dose, if you know that term? Like beyond X amount, you won't get any. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Beyond it, it's
Yeah.
just wasteful. Like what's that 100-degree point for creatine?
Yeah, well, it seems like most of the studies show benefit with about 5 grams per day.
That's pretty low.
So it's pretty low, but I mean, I know some people go higher. That's about what I take.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's what I go with, just because that's what I've seen in most of the studies.
Okay. And then morning, afternoon, post training, pre training, nighttime.
I'm not sure it matters that much, but Tommy has noticed, and the details are so technical, I can't even remember them, that it's a stimulant in some people. So he gets kind of, that experience like when you have too much caffeine, you kind of
Yeah.
get a bit kind of overstimulated, a bit jittery, maybe some heart palpitations. And I haven't noticed that at all, nothing of the sort. But he does, and apparently it's not uncommon. And like I say, he did find a big technical mechanism, but I can't remember any of it right now. So it might be an idea, it's just something to be aware of, and then, maybe not take it last thing before you go to bed.
Okay. Is there any other supplements that people should not take? Like avoid these like the plague, no matter what people say, based on the research you and Tommy have looked at?
Well, it seems like folic acid is a bit of a villain right now. I wouldn't, I wouldn't take a supplement. If it says folic acid on the bottle, I wouldn't take that.
Okay.
And to a lot of people listening, that would be like old news. And they're like, yeah, I've heard it a million times before. And it's true, but you'd be amazed how many people out there don't know that folic acid can be trouble. So it can block the absorption of real folate whilst not really doing what folate is supposed to do. So it can cause a big problem.
Is that the MTHFR pathway as well? Because Ben Lynch was talking about that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so I should definitely defer to Ben Lynch, right? He's an incredible expert. So yeah, maybe link to that episode in the podcast. And,
yeah, it was confusing but awesome stuff. I mean, that stuff, a lot of that stuff really goes over my head. I tend to be more of a generalist when it comes to a lot of things, but it's fascinating and important for sure. But I'm really interested in the testing and getting quantification, because a little story, like for me over the years, I've never really tracked anything, and my friend Josh Trent, who came on the show, tried to get me on this like Fitbit or some sort of tracker to get your steps and your sleep and your lifestyle and all that stuff. So I just was messing around a little bit on the iPhone, and on their Apple Health app, they have that tracker. I downloaded a tracker app and started looking at my steps and really holding myself accountable. It is amazing when you start getting the data back, the numbers that give you that objective viewpoint on what you're actually doing. I thought I was, active 10,000 steps a day. I was more like 5,000, maybe 5,000. And then when you start holding yourself to that, okay, I'm gonna get my weekly average to 10,000 steps. I mean, that's changing. I'm walking everywhere now. I'm walking 3-4 miles a day. I've just noticed no weight change, but energy, just way more mental clarity, just because of the 10,000 steps a day, sleep better, just the movement piece. And that's all because I had some stupid little app on my phone that told me like what numbers I was doing, because I didn't know. It's hard to guess. You can't guess and check when it comes to a lot of these things.
Yeah, no, and some people, my guess is that not everybody responds in that way, right? Like some people, it causes them a lot of anxiety to have these things measured and monitored and tracked. But yeah, certainly that's been my experience. I respond very well to that kind of information, and the same is true of the blood chemistry. I was talking to a cyclist yesterday who has iron overload, and he just never really considered what was going on inside of his body at all. He knew he was a little bit overweight, and he'd taken to a low carbohydrate diet because he'd noticed that his fasting blood glucose was starting to rise and he was becoming a bit carbohydrate intolerant. And then I don't know what suddenly made him change his mind, but he did a blood chemistry with me, and it turned out he had iron overload. And then suddenly it just opened up this whole world of research and an opportunity for him. And it was kind of at that moment when you see the test results, you're like, wow, this is not good. Like, I need to make some like serious changes here and like think about what I'm doing. And so it can be quite a pivotal moment to see the test results.
So I got a lot of test results done probably 2 years ago, and I haven't gotten a test since, beyond basic vitamin D panels and all that checkup stuff. What's the first place I should start? Should I do the $35 test, or what's the gold standard where to go for someone who maybe hasn't gotten tested in a while, or it's their first time getting research on them?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a gold standard, really. I mean, I like to start with the most general test first and then work over to the more advanced stuff. So yeah, the blood chemistry, I mean, a lot of people will already have that data, right? So, if you already have that data, you can send it to me and I'll look at it for you. So yeah, the $35 blood panel, I think that's a really great place to start tracking progress, to see what you're doing. Is it working for you? And if your triglycerides are creeping up and up and up, and your fasting blood glucose is creeping up and up and up, that trend, that vector, it tells you something about what you're doing, whether or not it's working. And I think that's a really great place to start. But if you've got a bunch of symptoms, if you know that, if you think, oh, well, I'm tired every day and I'm not sleeping very well and I'm not recovering as well as I used to and I'm bloated, then I think it makes sense to do some tests to try and figure out what's going on there. And that's usually a one-time process. Like, I don't keep doing stool tests on myself. I found when I did that, I found a pinworm and some weird amoeba, and I took some medicine and some botanical herbs and killed those things, and now they're gone. Like, I did the retest and that's the end of that. I don't have to keep doing that unless I had some reason to suspect that something had gone wrong, right? So those more advanced tests, they're usually a one-time process.
Yeah, absolutely. With the blood testing, one of the things that goes through my mind is that it takes kind of a snapshot of where you're at in that day and that time, and you kind of extrapolate out general patterns. So are they accurate because it's only one day, it's only 1 hour, it's only 1 minute even of where you are? Is it accurate to assume how your body works based on that one little snapshot? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
You're right. There's definitely caveats, and then some of the things that you could measure on a blood chemistry, those levels will vary.
Like if I'm having a terrible day and I meet someone, they're gonna think I'm an asshole. But that's not normally how I am. I just got cut off in traffic and had a fight and yada yada yada. But if they meet me on a great day, they'll think I'm Mr. Positive and that, oh my God, I can't stand this guy. He has so much energy. But that's not how I am. I'm somewhere in between. I'm pretty consistent. If they saw me over a year, they'd realize that. I think that's kind of a little bit how testing works, or I could be wrong because I don't do testing.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. So yeah, I mean, if you did a heavy workout and then did a blood chemistry the next day, you'd see some changes in your levels of inflammation. So maybe you see an increase in C-reactive protein, or maybe some of the transaminase enzymes like ALT and AST will be elevated just because you've just been breaking down the cells, right? That's kind of what the workout is for. But so yeah, you have to take that into consideration. And I think it's a good idea to not do super heavy workout within a few days of doing an expensive blood chemistry. I mean, if it's a $35 one, maybe you don't care. You just want to find out what it's doing to your body. And then, if you're doing it frequently enough, then you get to see those vectors, right? Like, so the software that I use, it compares the values over time. It turns it into a time series. So you can actually see the trend over time. And yeah, sure, if if there's a reason why there's an outlier, then you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, quite often you see a trend that you don't like.
Okay. I get it. Let's do some rapid fires or some questions I ask several people. What's been the biggest lesson you've learned this past year?
Biggest lesson I've learned this year? I think it's that, I used to think that stress was everything. I used to think that stress was the root of all evil, that all disease was caused by stress, and that all we needed to do was get rid of the stress and everybody would be fine. And, I was under a lot of stress when I started this whole process. But since then, I'm still training. I've launched a business. I got married. I had a kid. I've moved house twice, and I don't have adrenal fatigue. And so something else is going on there, right? It's not just the absolute amount of stress you have. So that's been an important lesson I've learned this year, I think.
What do you think it was?
I think it's like an accumulation. It's partly how you handle the stress, right? It's not the stress per se, it's your reaction to it.
Yeah.
And so if you can use some Jedi mind tricks like guided meditation, you can get better at handling stress.
Okay.
And then all the stuff that's going on inside your body, that's also stress, right? So if you can clean up your act inside, that's going to help you overall.
Yeah. So you mentioned meditation, cleaning yourself up. Is there any other anti-stress hacks you have? Jedi mind tricks?
No.
Okay.
I say Jedi mind tricks. I really mean Headspace.
Yeah.
That's still my go-to thing. Headspace is just
the app.
fancy. Yeah, right? The app Headspace. I'm sure it's been mentioned before on the podcast.
I don't think it has. I've heard a lot about it though.
Oh, really?
Is it a good app?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's universally loved. It's a British guy called Andy Puddicombe that he narrates, he teaches you. It's like being coached one-on-one into the process of guided meditation. And it's really wonderful. It's truly wonderful. And everyone will love it.
What's the commitment like? Is it every day?
No, it's like, so he has a program he calls Take 10. So you do 10 minutes a day for 10 days. And then if you want, you can continue and do 15. But, it's like, the 80-20 rule. Like most of the benefit comes from just taking 10 minutes to yourself and just clearing your mind as best you can and just listening to the narration and just doing it, just 10 minutes.
What does a typical morning look like for you, Chris, or a typical day of eating? What's your meal frequency or what you're going?
You have to be careful with the high fat ketogenic diet because you don't feel hungry at all. And, I know this is not just me. This is all of the athletes I work with end up doing the same. You have to watch you don't start under eating. And so, I eat, a lot of bone broth, a lot of leftovers, I've totally done away with the meal times. Like they don't mean anything to me. I'll eat any food at any time. And that's been extremely helpful. It just makes things so simple. I eat a lot of seafood. I eat sardines and greens, 46 different types of plants per week. I counted recently. I thought that was kind of interesting to try and figure out. I get all of our food. So Julie's wonderful. She goes to the farmer's market multiple times a week. So that's where all our food comes from. And our meat comes from local farmers that we've made a relationship with through the farmer's market. I'm big into sauna at the moment. You can kind of see my sauna.
Nice.
Like a cheap sauna, for $1,000 you can get one of these boxes with kind of lined with tin foil, and you put these. They're just like reptile lamps,
Yeah, they really are.
Lamps.
I've seen those. I geek out on saunas. You can actually make them too. You can make them.
Yeah,
yourself.
I'm sure. Like when I bought this thing and I put it together, I thought, oh my god, I could have made this like from bits from Home Depot and from the pet store, right, for a lot less than $1,000.
Yeah, or just get a membership to LA Fit. That's what I do. Just go use
maybe
their sauna.
I should. Maybe I'm. Yeah, exactly.
I'm doing it after this, chatting it up with the retarees, that 11 o'clock crew. It's the old wisdom.
That's one of those things you can do. Like it's a double-edged thing. Like it's a double benefit, right? You can get your meditation in. You can get a bit of what looks like cardio training through the heat shock. And, that saves you time that you would otherwise spend running or riding or swimming or whatever.
Yeah, there's no meditating with those 70-year-olds. They want to talk. They give you're young, they give you their stories. So, Chris, what's kind of one recommended book, podcast, resource, video, coach that you, if you had to distill it down to one place to go, you would recommend?
Well, it really depends on the person, obviously. If you're a geeky person like me, and you really like the idea of biochemistry and trying to figure out complicated problems with lots of variables, or if you're a health and fitness professional, then my number one resource is Brian Walsh's Metabolic Fitness Pro. And Brian Walsh is a naturopathic doctor from Maryland. And he is a critical thinker like no other I've met. And he's also a brilliant teacher. He's a biochemist. He's been involved in the design of a number of different lab tests. He is just utterly awesome. Like anything you can find by Brian Walsh, just listen to because it's just totally brilliant. Okay. And he has this training course where he stands in front of a whiteboard and teaches you biochemistry. And then you do little multiple choice questions underneath the video afterwards. And I was just totally engrossed and hooked on that and absolutely loved it. And if you're a fitness professional, it's just going to make you 100 times better than any of your competition if you understand this biochemistry. So if you're the sort of person that responds well to that, that would be a really good recommendation.
Okay. Awesome, Chris. So Nourish, Balance, Thrive, the website. And then do you guys have a podcast as well?
Yeah, exactly. So I've been doing a podcast. Yeah, I've kind of copied everything you do. It's a great way to meet people, though, isn't it? I've like just
Yeah.
made so many amazing connections through my podcast.
Yeah, it's
So
really
the
cool.
podcast is something I do each week, and I also do free consultations at the moment. So if you come to nourishbalanceThrive.com, there's a button you can schedule a free consultation with me, and I can talk to you about ketosis or lab testing or whatever it is that you feel like you could need some help with.
Okay. Cool, man. Well, is there an episode they should start with if they go check out the podcast since they're already listening?
Oh, you know what? This week, and I'm sure it'll be out by the time that you release this podcast, I'm just about to release an episode of the podcast with Brian Walsh, who's the doctor I mentioned earlier, on social isolation. And I've just never heard anyone talking about this stuff before. And it's an amazing story, and I think it's going to have a profound impact on everybody's health. So yeah, social isolation, Brian Walsh, that'll be on my podcast out this Friday. So I'm sure that'll be long before this podcast airs.
Chris, my man, thanks for coming on, talking about testing, endurance, ketosis, lots of good stuff.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much, Clark. It's very kind of you to have me.
All right, Chris, till next time, man.
Cheers, then.
PaleoHacks.com is the host of this show. Head on over there, get on the community, the forum, the delicious, mouth-watering recipes, good stuff. I've been working with people one-on-one and in groups for the past, 5 or so years, and I've come up with 11 big questions. These are the questions that people ask themselves, when they go to bed. These are the questions that can really impact, influence, and change your life for the better. And so I put them together in a free report on my site at clarkdanger.com. You can go over there right now, and no gimmicks, no hacks, no nothing. It's just a free report. You just got to enter your email, and it's the 11 questions that'll change your life forever. That's right, forever changed. Hope I sold you on that. I mean, they're really cool if you take them seriously. I believe in them, and that's why I'm telling you guys about them. So that's just clarkdanger.com, and of course paleohacks.com, the place to be. Everything paleo and more. All right, we'll see you next Thursday. Thanks so much.